The walk home was a ritual of decompression. 12 hours in the ER had a way of coiling the springs in Sarah Jenkins's shoulders until they were steel cables. Each step on the cracked sidewalk was a conscious effort to release the tension, to let the ghosts of the day fade. The ghost of the teenager from the motorcycle crash, the ghost of the elderly woman whose heart had simply given out, the ghost of the crying child with a dislocated elbow. She mentally ticked them off, releasing each one into the humid evening air of Oak Creek. The scent of rain on hot asphalt, a smell that usually brought her comfort, was just another flat sensory input tonight. Her feet, encased in orthopedic sneakers that had long ago surrendered their claim to comfort, ached with a dull, rhythmic throb that matched her stride. All she wanted was her tiny third-floor apartment, a microwave dinner, and the blessed silence of being alone. Ahead of her, a woman, a nanny, judging by her frantic energy and the oversized bag slung over her shoulder, was trying to wrangle a small child on the sidewalk. The girl, who couldn't have been more than 7, was a spark of pure energy, her bright yellow raincoat a splash of sunshine against the graying twilight. She was laughing, a sound as clear and pure as a bell, as she bounced a brilliant red ball against the brick wall of a closed bakery. Sarah offered a tired, tight-lipped smile as she approached. The nanny looked frazzled, trying to answer a phone call while keeping the child from getting too close to the street. It was a familiar urban ballet, one Sarah had seen 1,000 times. Then the rhythm broke. The girl, in a burst of exuberant energy, threw the ball a little too hard. It ricocheted off the bricks at a sharp angle, shooting past the nanny and bouncing once, twice, before rolling lazily into the street. "Leo, no!" the nanny cried, her phone forgotten. But it was too late. The girl, her world narrowed to the singular focus of retrieving her toy, darted off the curb. For a child, the street was just an extension of the sidewalk, a gray field to be crossed. For Sarah, it was a kill box. Her mind, honed by years of split-second triage decisions, didn't process the thought in words. It was a flash of pure data: small child, red ball, open street, velocity, vector, impact. From the corner of her eye, she caught the glint of steel and the deep, arrogant blue of a luxury sedan. It wasn't just moving. It was moving with the kind of entitled speed that assumed the world would clear a path. The driver's head was down, illuminated by the telltale glow of a phone screen. There was no time to shout, no time for a warning. The entire event unfolded in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Sarah's weariness vanished, burned away by a surge of pure, cold adrenaline. Her feet, which had ached moments before, were suddenly light. She didn't decide to run. Her body was already in motion, 2 long, desperate strides closing the distance. The world slowed to a thick, syrupy crawl. She could see the individual stitches on the back of the girl's yellow raincoat. She could see the oblivious expression on the driver's face as he finally looked up, his eyes wide with the stupid, slow shock of the unprepared. She reached the girl, Leona, and didn't stop. Her hands made contact, not a gentle push but a forceful, desperate shove aimed at the girl's center of mass. She felt the small body fly forward, landing in a surprised heap on the damp grass of the curb. Safe. Sarah had no time to get clear. She tried to pivot, to turn the coming impact into a glancing blow, but the car was too close, too fast. The bumper, a chrome grimace of impending violence, caught her left side. The sound was a sickening, wet crunch, a duet of shattering plastic from the headlight and snapping bone from her own body. A supernova of pain exploded in her arm and ribs. The force of it lifted her off her feet, tossing her like a discarded doll. She hit the asphalt hard, the rough surface scraping her cheek raw. For a moment, there was only the jarring, rattling shock, the world a kaleidoscope of blue car, gray sky, and spinning concrete. Then, silence. A ringing, profound silence in her ears that slowly gave way to the screech of tires, the distant honking of other cars, and the high, terrified wail of the child. My arm, she thought, the observation detached, clinical. She tried to push herself up, but her left arm wouldn't obey. It lay at an angle that was fundamentally wrong, a broken branch on a tree. The door of the blue sedan slammed open. A man in an expensive suit, his face a mask of fury, stormed out. Richard Sterling didn't look at Sarah, lying broken on his path. He looked at the cracked headlight and the long scratch along the fender of his pristine car. "What the hell?" he bellowed, his voice vibrating with rage, not concern. "Are you blind? Did you see what you did? You just ran right out in front of me?" Sarah's vision was tunneling, the edges turning dark and fuzzy. She pushed through the pain, her ER training her only anchor in the swirling chaos. Her gaze found the little girl in the yellow raincoat, now wrapped in the arms of the hysterical nanny. The girl was crying, but she was standing. She was whole. Patient is safe. The thought was her last coherent one before the pain, a great black wave, crested and crashed over her. The sound of approaching sirens was a distant, fading song as the world dissolved into darkness. Waking up was a slow, painful swim towards a ceiling she knew too well. The acoustic tiles, with their familiar water stain patterns like a beige Rorschach test, were the same ones she stared at during long night shifts when a moment of quiet descended on the ER. The smell, however, was different from the patient's side of the curtain. It was the sterile tang of antiseptic, yes, but underneath it was the cloying sweetness of her own blood and the sharp, metallic scent of fear. Her fear, "Sarah? Sarah, can you hear me?" It was Dr. Evans. His face, usually set in a mask of professional calm, was etched with genuine concern. Beside him was Maria, her best friend in the nursing corps, her eyes red-rimmed. "Hey," Sarah rasped, her throat feeling like sandpaper. "Did I miss my shift?" Maria let out a watery laugh. "No, you idiot! You decided to play superhero on your day off." The events came rushing back, not as a memory, but as a physical echo in her nerve endings. The shove, the impact, the blinding pain. She tried to sit up, but a fresh bolt of agony shot from her left arm, now encased in a heavy plaster cast and bound in a sling. "Easy there," Dr. Evans said gently. "You've got a compound fracture of the humerus and 2 cracked ribs. You're lucky, Sarah. A few inches to the right, and we'd be having a very different conversation." Relief washed over her, thick and immediate. "The girl, Leo, not a scratch on her," Maria confirmed, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Her nanny has been calling you a guardian angel. The girl's mother is, well, she's unavailable apparently. Some kind of big work trip. But they know what you did." For a moment, Sarah allowed herself to feel a flicker of pride. It was the core of her being, the reason she endured the long hours and the emotional toll. She helped. She fixed things. Today, she had saved a life. The pain was a worthy price. That feeling lasted for approximately 17 minutes. It ended when Officer Miller walked through the curtain. He was a stocky man, with a face that seemed permanently set in a state of mild disappointment with the world. He held a small notepad, and his eyes scanned Sarah not as a patient or a hero, but as a problem to be categorized. "Ma'am," he began, his voice flat. "Sarah Jenkins, I need to take your statement about the traffic incident." "Okay," Sarah said, wincing as she shifted in the bed. "So, in your own words, tell me why you ran into an active roadway." The question hung in the air, stripped of any nuance. It wasn't, "What happened?" It was, "Why did you do this reckless thing?" "I didn't just run into the street," Sarah said, her voice strained. "There was a child. A little girl chasing her ball. The driver, he wasn't looking." Officer Miller scribbled a note, his pen scratching loudly in the quiet room. "The driver, Mr. Sterling, states that a woman, you, darted into the street from between parked cars, giving him no time to react. He says he swerved to avoid you and the child." Sarah stared at him, baffled. That's not what happened. He was on his phone. He was speeding. I pushed the girl out of the way. I took the hit for her." "Do you often run into traffic, Miss Jenkins?" Miller asked, his eyes still on his notepad. "What? No. I'm a nurse. I know better than that. I was saving a child's life." "Your heroic intentions aside," Miller said, the phrase dripping with condescension, "the fact remains that you entered the roadway unexpectedly. Mr. Sterling's vehicle is significantly damaged." He clicked his pen. "We have his statement. We have yours. We'll write up the report." He didn't ask if she was okay. He didn't acknowledge the cast on her arm or the pain that was clearly radiating from her side. He treated her like an unreliable witness in her own trauma. He closed his notepad and left, leaving a chill in the room that had nothing to do with the hospital's aggressive air conditioning. Maria was fuming, muttering about filing a complaint, but Sarah just felt a profound sense of deflation. The world was already being twisted into a shape she didn't recognize. The second, more devastating blow came an hour later, in the form of a man in a perfectly tailored but soul-crushingly gray suit. He introduced himself as Mr. Henderson from Risk Management, his handshake as limp and cold as a dead fish. He didn't bring flowers or a card. He brought a clipboard. "Miss Jenkins," he began, his voice a low, dispassionate monotone, I'm here to discuss the incident. There's not much to discuss, Sarah said, her patience wearing thin. I saved a little girl. Be that as it may, Henderson continued, ignoring her statement. We need to clarify the hospital's position. As you were off duty and not on hospital property, this cannot be classified as a workplace injury. Your medical expenses will need to be processed through your personal insurance provider, and subsequently, the at-fault party's automotive insurance. The at-fault party was the one driving the car, Sarah said, bewildered that this even needed to be said. Henderson gave a non-committal shrug. That is for the insurance companies to adjudicate. Our primary concern here is the hospital's exposure. He cleared his throat, his eyes flicking around the room, as if looking for listening devices. A high-profile incident involving an employee, even a purportedly heroic one, presents a significant liability. The media will likely get a hold of this, and it is imperative that the hospital controls the narrative. To that end, you are not to speak to any reporters. Any and all media inquiries are to be directed to our public relations department. Is that understood? The word purportedly struck Sarah like a slap. He hadn't just questioned her heroism, he had put it in air quotes. He wasn't seeing a dedicated employee who had just embodied the highest ideals of her profession. He was seeing a lawsuit waiting to happen, a loose cannon who had acted outside the carefully defined lines of hospital policy. You're worried about the hospital's reputation? Sarah asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of pain and disbelief. I have a broken arm, I have cracked ribs, I saved a child's life, and you're worried about PR? I'm worried about the responsible stewardship of this institution, Miss Jenkins, Henderson said, his voice unwavering. Your actions, however well-intentioned, were reckless. Recklessness creates unpredictability, and unpredictability creates risk. Please sign here, acknowledging that you have been briefed on the hospital's media policy regarding this matter. He slid the clipboard onto her bedside table. The form was cold, impersonal, filled with legal jargon that felt like a cage being built around her. She was in a hospital bed, in the very building she'd dedicated her life to, and she had never felt more alone or more betrayed. The pain in her arm was a dull fire, but the icy chill of Henderson's visit cut far deeper, freezing something in the core of her soul. The first few days at home were a blur of pain medication and daytime television. Sarah's small apartment, usually her sanctuary, felt more like a prison cell. The cast on her arm was a clumsy, heavy reminder of her new limitations. Simple tasks like opening a jar or tying her shoes became monumental undertakings. But the physical discomfort was soon eclipsed by a far more insidious kind of pain. It started with the local evening news. She was channel surfing when her own face flashed across the screen. It was a grainy cell phone video, shot from an angle that rendered the scene almost incomprehensible. It showed a figure, her lunging into the street, followed by the screech of tires and the thud of impact. There was no context, no little girl, no red ball. The news anchor, a man with perfectly coiffed hair and a voice like polished veneer, spoke in grave tones. Controversy tonight surrounding a dramatic traffic incident in downtown Oak Creek. While nurse Sarah Jenkins is being hailed as a hero by some for saving a child, the driver of the vehicle, local businessman Richard Sterling, tells a different story. The screen cut to Sterling, standing in front of his barely damaged luxury car. He looked solemn, concerned, a masterclass in feigned sincerity. My heart goes out to Miss Jenkins for her injuries, he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. But the fact is, she appeared out of nowhere. I was driving the speed limit when she and the child suddenly ran into the road. I swerved, I braked, I did everything I could. I'm just thankful that my actions prevented a far greater tragedy. The report then cut to a legal analyst who talked about shared liability and the legal culpability of pedestrians. The segment ended with the anchor concluding, a complex situation with conflicting accounts. The one thing that is certain is that it serves as a stark reminder for pedestrians to always use designated crosswalks. Sarah stared at the screen, her mouth agape. It wasn't just a different version of events, it was a different reality. They had erased her choice, her sacrifice, and replaced it with a narrative of her own recklessness. The story wasn't nurse saves child, it was woman creates hazard. The rage began as a slow burn in her chest, hot and suffocating. The official letter from Oak Creek General Hospital arrived 2 days later. The crisp envelope felt heavy in her good hand. She ripped it open, her heart pounding. It was from Mr. Henderson's office. Dear Miss Jenkins, in light of the ongoing police investigation and the significant media attention surrounding the incident on October 5th, a full internal review is required. As your actions have brought the hospital into the public discourse in a manner that may compromise its reputation and expose it to potential legal challenges, we are placing you on paid administrative leave, effective immediately, pending the outcome of this review. Please refrain from visiting hospital property until you are otherwise notified. Sincerely, Mark Henderson, Director of Risk Management, paid administrative leave. It sounded so sterile, so professional. But Sarah knew what it was. A suspension. A punishment. She was being benched, hidden away like a dirty secret, because her heroism was inconvenient. She had bled for a stranger on the street, an act that should have been the epitome of her calling, and her employer was treating her like a criminal. She crumpled the letter, the sharp edges of the paper digging into her palm. The real descent into the bureaucratic labyrinth began the following Monday. Determined to fight back, she decided to start with the insurance. She spent 45 minutes navigating an automated phone tree, pressing 1 for English, 3 for new claims, and 0 repeatedly in a desperate attempt to reach a human being. Finally, a voice came on the line. Sterling Automotive Insurance, this is Brenda. How can I help you? Brenda's voice was aggressively cheerful, the kind of cheerfulness designed to grind you down. Sarah explained the situation for the 10th time, her voice tight with forced patience. She gave the date, the location, the police report number. There was a long silence filled with the sound of furious typing. Okay, I have the file right here, Brenda said, her tone shifting. The cheerfulness was gone, replaced by a cool, practiced authority. According to the adjuster's report, which is based on the official police statement and a declaration from our client, Mr. Sterling, we've determined that liability is, at minimum, shared 50/50. Our client maintains he was not at fault. 50? 50? Sarah exclaimed, her voice rising. He was on his phone. He was speeding. I have 2 cracked ribs. Ma'am, I understand you're upset, Brenda said, a masterclass in condescending empathy. However, the report notes that you entered the roadway from an uncontrolled point. Therefore, you assumed a significant portion of the risk. As a result, your claim for medical liability against our client's policy has been denied. So you're not going to pay for my broken arm? That is correct. You'll need to submit those claims to your own health insurance provider. This is insane, Sarah whispered, leaning her head against the cool wall of her kitchen. Is there anything else I can help you with today? Brenda chirped, the cheerfulness now back in full force, a weapon of mass frustration. Sarah hung up without another word. The final insult arrived a week later, not as a phone call or a letter, but as a stack of thick, intimidating envelopes in her mailbox. Each one bore the return address of Oak Creek General Hospital's billing department. She sat at her small kitchen table and opened them one by one. The emergency room visit, $4,800. The orthopedic surgeon's consultation, $1,250. Anesthesiology services, $2,200. Radiology 3 X-rays, $975. Surgical hardware, 1 titanium plate and 6 screws, $7,300. The total was nearly $20,000. Her own employer, the institution she had given years of her life to, was billing her for the privilege of getting hit by a car while saving a child's life. Her health insurance, she knew, would cover a portion of it after her deductible was met, but the rest, the co-pays, the out-of-network fees, it was a mountain of debt she had no way to climb, especially now that she was on leave. That night, she made the mistake of looking herself up online. The local news article had spawned a comment section, a cesspool of anonymous cruelty. Sounds like she was trying to get a payday. Classic insurance scam. Why wasn't she watching where she was going? Pedestrians these days think they own the road. Feel bad for the driver. Now he has to deal with this crazy woman. The words blurred through her tears. Every pillar of her life, her job, her reputation, her financial stability, her faith in basic decency was crumbling. She was sitting alone in her apartment, her arm in a cast, a stack of bills on her table that she couldn't pay, and the entire world seemed to be convinced that she was the villain. The system wasn't just failing her. It was actively trying to crush her. The burn of rage had cooled into a heavy, cold stone of despair in the pit of her stomach. She was adrift, and for the first time in her life, Sarah Jenkins had no idea how to stop herself from sinking. The phone rang, its shrill cry cutting through the thick silence of the apartment. Sarah stared at it from the sofa, where she had been watching the dust motes dance in a stray sunbeam for the better part of an hour. It was an unknown number with a Houston area code. Probably another debt collector, or maybe a reporter who had gotten her number, eager for a quote to twist. She watched it ring, her first instinct to ignore it, to let the world remain outside the fragile walls of her solitude, let it go to voicemail. But on the fifth ring, some impulse she couldn't name made her reach for it with her good hand. Maybe it was just the profound boredom of her forced inaction. "Hello?" she said, her voice flat, devoid of energy. There was a moment of static, a faint ethereal hiss that sounded like a whisper from a great distance. Then, a woman's voice, calm and impossibly clear, spoke. "Is this Sarah Jenkins?" "Who's calling?" Sarah asked, her tone still defensive. "My name is Dr. Eva Rostova. I believe you saved my daughter's life last week." The name didn't register at first. Rostova. Dr. Rostova. She had been so consumed by her own ordeal that she hadn't even learned the name of the family. The nanny had just said the mother was away on a work trip. Yes. Leona, Sarah said, the name feeling foreign on her tongue. "Is she okay?" "She's perfect," the voice replied. And for the first time, Sarah could hear a tremor of profound emotion beneath the calm exterior. "She's sleeping right now. She has a little drawing she wants to give you. It's of a nurse with wings." Tears pricked at the corners of Sarah's eyes. It was the first genuinely kind thing anyone had said to her in what felt like an eternity. "I'm glad she's okay. I really am." "I'm calling to thank you, Miss Jenkins," Dr. Rostova said. "I'm sorry it's taken me a few days. Communication can be a bit scheduled where I am." Sarah frowned. "Are you out of the country?" The strange hiss on the line suddenly made more sense. A bad international connection. There was a soft chuckle on the other end. "You could say that. I'm in a workplace with a fairly significant commute. Forgive the call quality. We're traveling at about 17,500 miles per hour right now." Sarah's mind went blank. She sat up straight, the sudden movement sending a twinge through her ribs. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "I'm calling from the International Space Station," Dr. Rostova said, as calmly as if she were calling from across town. "I'm the flight engineer on the current expedition. My daughter, Leona, is with her grandmother in Oak Creek while I'm on mission." Sarah Jenkins, ER nurse, suspended employee, and woman on the verge of despair, was receiving a phone call from low Earth orbit. The sheer, staggering absurdity of it was like a jolt of electricity to her system. She was speechless. "Miss Jenkins? Are you still there?" "I'm here," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm here." "Good," Dr. Rostova said, her voice turning serious. "Because I need you to listen to me. I have access to the news feeds up here. I've seen the reports. I've read the articles. And I have access to other things, too. High-resolution satellite imagery, traffic camera telemetry from the city archives, things that give a very clear picture." The static on the line seemed to fade, and Dr. Rostova's voice became sharp, precise, every word a perfectly calibrated instrument. "Down there, on the ground, you have a lot of static, a lot of atmospheric interference. People's opinions, their agendas, their greed, it all gets in the way. It distorts the signal. But up here, things are very clear. I've seen the flight path data. I know Mr. Sterling's vehicle was traveling at 52 miles per hour in a 35-mile-per-hour zone. I've seen the infrared data that shows his hands were not on the steering wheel in the 10 seconds prior to impact. I know exactly what happened." Sarah was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. It was the validation, the pure, unadulterated, evidence-based truth. "You are not a liability, Miss Jenkins," Dr. Rostova continued, her voice a mixture of cold, scientific fury and a mother's fierce gratitude. "You are not reckless. You performed a selfless, instantaneous calculation of risk and physics and chose to sacrifice yourself to save my child. You are a hero. Do not let those people on the ground, with their heads buried in spreadsheets and legal documents, ever tell you otherwise." Sarah tried to speak, but her throat was thick with emotion. "They suspended me, my job." "I know," Dr. Rostova said softly. "I know they did. And I know it's not my place to interfere in terrestrial matters. But my daughter's safety and the honor of the person who ensured it is not a terrestrial matter. It's a human matter. And I'm afraid I'm about to make it a very public one." Hope, an emotion Sarah thought she had lost for good, began to bloom in her chest, fragile, but insistent. "What do you mean?" "I have a scheduled press conference with NASA in 2 days. A routine mission update. I think I'm going to update them on a few other things as well," Dr. Rostova said, and now her voice was pure steel. "While I am physically very far away, Miss Jenkins, I want you to know that my reach is not. The world is about to hear the truth from a slightly different perspective. Just hold on. Help is on the way. The line clicked and went dead, replaced by the mundane dial tone. Sarah slowly lowered the phone, her hand trembling. She looked around her small, lonely apartment, at the stack of bills, at the cast on her arm. Nothing had physically changed. But everything was different. For the first time in 2 weeks, she didn't feel like she was sinking. She felt like she was looking up, past the clouds, past the sky, to a single, brilliant star that was fighting for her. The NASA livestream began with the typical fanfare. A blandly smiling moderator in a Houston control room, a massive screen behind him showing the Earth as a serene blue marble. Sarah sat on her sofa, her laptop balanced on her knees, her heart hammering against her bruised ribs. She didn't know what to expect. A brief mention? A word of thanks? On the screen, the feed switched to the interior of the International Space Station. Dr. Eva Rostova floated into view, her hair a halo around her head. The cluttered, high-tech background of the station a stark contrast to her calm, focused expression. She was the picture of competence. The moderator asked a predictable question about a recent microgravity experiment. Dr. Rostova answered it with her characteristic precision, explaining the complex science in clear, accessible terms. She was a brilliant communicator. Then, the moderator moved on. Dr. Rostova, you're now past the halfway point of your 6-month mission. Can you share with us a personal reflection on what it's like to be so far from home, from your family? This was it. Sarah held her breath. Dr. Rostova smiled, a sad but beautiful expression. That's a great question. You know, the hardest part of being up here is the feeling of helplessness. You see the world from this incredible vantage point, this beautiful, fragile system, but you're fundamentally disconnected from it. You can't intervene. You can't hold your child's hand when she's scared. You have to put your faith in the people down there. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. Recently, my faith was put to the ultimate test, and it was rewarded by the actions of one extraordinary person, a nurse from my hometown of Oak Creek named Sarah Jenkins. On the ground, in the Houston press room, there was a quiet stir. This was not on the pre-approved list of topics. 2 weeks ago, Dr. Rostova continued, her eyes looking directly into the camera, speaking to the entire planet. A man named Richard Sterling was driving his car at nearly 20 miles per hour over the speed limit. Data shows his attention was on his phone, not the road. He was on a direct collision course with my 7-year-old daughter, Leona. Her voice, though calm, was now laced with an icy fury that was unmistakable. Miss Jenkins, an ER nurse who had just finished a 12-hour shift, did not hesitate. In the 1.8 seconds between my daughter entering the street and the point of impact, she covered 20 feet, pushed my daughter to safety, and absorbed the full force of the collision herself. She sustained a compound fracture and multiple broken ribs. Her first question to paramedics was whether my daughter was all right. Sarah was openly weeping now, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming power of hearing the truth told so clearly, so definitively. You would expect this to be a simple story of heroism, Dr. Rostova said, her gaze hardening. But on Earth, things are rarely simple. I have since learned that Mr. Sterling has used his wealth and influence to create a false narrative, blaming Miss Jenkins for the incident. I have learned that the hospital she has served for 8 years, Oak Creek General, has suspended her, citing reputational risk. They are billing her for the very medical care she requires because of her selfless act. This is not just an injustice, it is a moral failure. It is a sickness in a system that would punish a hero and protect a reckless man because one is a liability and the other has a better lawyer. She leaned closer to the camera, her voice dropping to a powerful, resonant level. From 250 miles up, I want to say this directly to Sarah Jenkins. You are a credit to your profession and to the human race, and to the administrators of Oak Creek General, and to Mr. Professionin. Sterling, I will say this. The universe is governed by laws. Physics, accountability, cause and effect. You cannot escape them forever. I will be dedicating my personal resources and the platform I have been given to ensuring that these laws are applied. My mission up here is to advance human knowledge, but I promise you, when I get home, my mission will be to ensure human decency. The feed cut back to a stunned moderator in Houston. The press conference was over, but the story had just begun. The explosion was instantaneous. Within an hour, Stand with Sarah was the #1 trending topic on every social media platform. The clip of Dr. Rostova's speech was everywhere, played on every major news network in the world. News vans, once camped outside Sterling's office building, were now parked in a solid line down Sarah's quiet residential street. Her phone, which had been silent for days, began to ring so incessantly she had to turn it off. The first tangible sign of the shift came that afternoon. A knock on her door revealed a sharp, impeccably dressed woman who introduced herself as Eleanor Vance. "I'm a partner at Vance and Associates," she said with a firm handshake. "I saw Dr. Rostova's speech. My firm would be honored to represent you pro bono. We're going to fix this." The public outcry against Oak Creek General was a tidal wave. Volunteers organized a protest outside the hospital, with hundreds of people holding signs that read, "Heroes not liabilities," and "Oak Creek General has no honor." The hospital's phone lines were jammed, their social media pages flooded with thousands of one-star reviews. For Richard Sterling, the reckoning was swift and brutal. The witness, who had been too intimidated to come forward, released their clear cell phone video to the press, showing Sterling looking down at his phone for a full 15 seconds before the crash. The police, under immense public pressure, reopened the case. By the end of the week, he was charged with reckless endangerment and filing a false police report. His company's board of directors called an emergency meeting and forced his resignation. The final act took place back where the bureaucratic nightmare had begun, in Mr. Henderson's office. This time, Sarah didn't go alone. Eleanor Vance walked beside her, carrying a leather briefcase that seemed to radiate pure competence. Henderson looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. His gray suit was rumpled, and a sheen of sweat glistened on his forehead. The smug, cold condescension was gone, replaced by a desperate, panicked energy. "Sarah, Miss Jenkins, I'm so glad you came," he stammered, scrambling to his feet. "There has been a terrible, terrible misunderstanding." "I don't think there has been, Mr. Henderson," Eleanor said, her voice as cool and sharp as ice. "I think, for the first time, everything is perfectly clear." "We've completed our internal review," Henderson said quickly, wringing his hands. "And we have found that your actions were, in fact, heroic and in line with the highest values of this institution. We are rescinding your leave immediately. We are, of course, writing off all of your medical bills and offering you full compensation for your pain and suffering. We'd also like to offer you a promotion, head nurse of the ER." Sarah looked at the man who had dismissed her, belittled her, and punished her for saving a child's life. She felt no anger, only a quiet, resolute strength. "I will accept the compensation and the immediate reinstatement to my current position," Sarah said, her voice steady and clear. "I am declining the promotion. I don't want a title given under duress. And Miss Vance will be filing a formal ethics complaint with the board of directors regarding your professional conduct. You don't get to light a house on fire and then take credit for calling the fire department." Mr. Henderson's face went pale. He sank back into his chair, a man utterly defeated, not by a lawsuit, but by a simple, unshakable truth that had been broadcast from the heavens. Walking out of his office and into the bright afternoon sun, Sarah felt the heavy cast on her arm not as a burden, but as a badge of honor. The months that followed were a whirlwind of healing, both physical and emotional. The cast came off, replaced by a sleek brace and a regimen of physical therapy that slowly coaxed the strength back into her arm. The legal matters, guided by Eleanor Vance's formidable expertise, resolved themselves with surprising speed. Richard Sterling, facing irrefutable evidence and public ruin, pleaded guilty. His sentence included a lengthy community service requirement at a trauma center, a punishment of poetic justice that brought a grim smile to Sarah's face. Oak Creek General, in a desperate bid to salvage its reputation, issued a sweeping public apology, established a Good Samaritan Fund to support employees injured while performing heroic acts off-duty, and quietly accepted Mr. Henderson's resignation. The world's attention moved on, as it always does. The hashtags faded, the news cycle turned. But for Sarah, the changes were permanent. She returned to the ER not as the same woman who had left it. The exhaustion was still there, the stress was still real, but the quiet deference was gone, replaced by a core of steel she hadn't known she possessed. She spoke up in meetings, challenged protocols she felt were detrimental to patient care, and advocated for her fellow nurses with a newfound ferocity. She had faced down a corrupt system and won, and the fear of a reprimand from management seemed trivial by comparison. Then, one sunny afternoon in early spring, an email arrived that made her heart leap. It was from a NASA liaison. "Dr. Rostova has completed her post-mission debriefing and quarantine. She and Leona would be honored if you would join them for a private lunch. She met them at a small, unassuming cafe on the outskirts of town. Dr. Ava Rostova was smaller in person than she seemed on screen, but she radiated an intensity and intelligence that filled the space around her. Leona, no longer just a flash of yellow raincoat in a traumatic memory, was a shy, bright-eyed girl with her mother's focused gaze. There were no cameras, no reporters. The conversation was not about lawsuits or media firestorms. They talked about school, about what it was like to see 16 sunrises a day, about the funny way hospital food always tasted the same. Leona, after hiding behind her mother's leg for 10 minutes, finally worked up the courage to present her gift. It was a drawing, carefully rendered in crayon on construction paper. On one side was a woman in blue scrubs with a misshapen halo. On the other was a woman in a silver spacesuit. A crudely drawn red line connected their hands across a starry expanse. "That's my mom in her office," Leo explained quietly, pointing to the astronaut. "And that's you. You're a hero." Eva's eyes met Sarah's over the top of her daughter's head, and in that shared look was a universe of understanding and gratitude that no words could ever capture. "Thank you, Sarah," Eva said, her voice thick with emotion. "For everything." "You helped me too," Sarah replied honestly. "You were the only one who did." The story could have ended there, a neat and tidy resolution. But Sarah's journey had changed her purpose. A year after the incident, she stood at a podium in an auditorium at Oak Creek General. Not as a patient, not as an employee on leave, but as the keynote speaker for the new nursing graduate orientation. The room was filled with young, eager faces, full of the same ideals and anxieties she once had. "They will teach you how to insert an IV, how to read a heart monitor, how to administer medication," Sarah began, her voice clear and strong, resonating through the hall. "But they won't teach you what to do when the system itself is the sickness. They won't teach you how to handle a bureaucracy that values liability over humanity. They won't teach you how to fight back when you are punished for doing the right thing." She looked out at the sea of faces, seeing her younger self in their eyes. "Your most important job will not be just to heal your patients, it will be to protect your own integrity. To be the advocate not just for the person in the bed, but for the principles of compassion and courage that brought you here. There will be times you feel small, powerless, and alone. But I am here to tell you that a single voice, speaking the truth, can be heard from a very, very long way away." She paused, a genuine smile spreading across her face. "So, be brave, be kind, and never, ever let anyone tell you that doing the right thing is the wrong move. Welcome to the front lines. It's an honor to have you here." Two Main. As she walked away from the podium to a standing ovation, Sarah felt a sense of peace she had never known. Her scars, visible and invisible, were no longer marks of trauma, but a map of her journey. She had been broken, betrayed, and nearly crushed. But she had emerged stronger, her quiet life now, one with a clear, resonant purpose, a purpose forged in a moment of crisis on a city street and validated by a voice from the stars.